Lead sheets are like training wheels. So they're useful at the beginning, but if you never take them off, then you never actually learn how to balance. The scary thing is, some musicians have been riding with training wheels for 10, 20, or even 30 years. And what's even more shocking is that a lot of them are very defensive about it. So they'll say things like, "But the lead sheet helps me." That's true, but that's what training wheels also do. The problem is not that you're using training wheels or the lead sheet. The problem is when you never take them off. So in this video, I'm going to show you a completely different and way more effective way to learn songs in jazz. And it's a way that's going to free you from depending on the lead sheet. Plus, it's actually going to make you sound like a real musician. And more importantly, I'm going to show you what you actually need instead of lead sheets. But before we go any further, if you want a head start on this jazz journey of yours, simply comment the word ebook in the comments and I will send you my free ebook. It's going to give you 10 simple steps to become a better jazz musician. Now, let's get into this. I've seen something that really worries me. People needing a lead sheet just to play a 12-bar blues. A 12-bar blues, one of the most basic structures in jazz. You know, without paper, I've seen some people who I honestly thought were decent musicians, but I've seen them freeze. And why? Because they've trained and programmed themselves to depend on notation instead of sound. Now, before I get the entire classical community coming to attack me, let me just say something very clearly. So classical training is not the problem. In fact, I'm a member of the classical, not just a member, I'm a fan of the classical school myself. The problem is when people learn jazz the classical way. That's basically like using wrestling techniques to learn golf. I mean, they're both sports and you're using the same body, but as you and I know, these are two completely different things. So classical training will emphasize things like, okay, you've got to read the notes accurately, or this is how you interpret a piece that's from this era. So it's supposed to be played like this. These are the wishes of the composer. With classical music, you are, if not reading, you're at least memorizing the exact notes that you're going to play in that piece. However, when we're looking at jazz now requires things like flexibility, interpretation, hearing the harmony, and also variation, because unlike classical, we don't allow you to play something exactly the same. We're expecting something slightly different every time. And jazz is also about some real-time decisions. So these are two different things. So when students come into jazz with classical habits, then they often think, you know what, I just need to play the correct notes and the correct rhythm and the correct chords. And this kind of thinking is exactly what keeps them stuck. So a lot of the time, students from the classical background will say things like, I don't have a good memory. But first of all, often that's not even true. Because to my knowledge, I mean, classical musicians are some of the most intelligent people that you'll ever come across. And anyway, usually that's not even the real issue. Because jazz musicians don't necessarily memorize songs note for note or chord by chord. The big difference is they're simply aware of things like harmonic patterns, functional movement, predictable formulas, and also the relationships between sounds. So the issue is not necessarily memory. It's simply understanding of certain tools and the use of your ears. So if you feel like you're stuck and you're needing charts for everything and you want to fix your foundation properly, simply type the word fundamentals in the comments and I will send you a link to my Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, which is going to show you the core fundamentals that every jazz musician needs to understand so that lead sheets don't necessarily become a crutch. So let's look at the song called Body and Soul. So here's the lead sheet for Body and Soul. And when most students see this, they're going to see many chords. They're going to see a particular key. They're going to see all these notes and rhythms. Basically, they're seeing a lot of things to memorize. But I want to show you how a jazz musician sees this completely different. So instead of seeing all these isolated notes, in fact, I'll tell you what I see. The first thing that I see is I see a 2 chord. So I'm seeing that's a 2 chord going to chord 6. I just happen to be in the key of D flat right now. So it's chord 2 going to chord 6, and then there's a 2-5-1. After that 1 chord, we go to chord 4, and then I'm going to go to chord 3, followed by a flat 3 diminished, and then chord 2. After that chord 2, I see myself playing the 2-5 of chord 6. Okay, so honestly, that's what's going on in my head. And a lot of the time, my students ask me, well, when you're playing a song, what are you thinking of? And I'm actually thinking of these movements. So in other words, I'm not necessarily restricted to the key of D flat. I'm seeing the structure of the entire song. I know how the song's put together. So what this does for me is if I take this, let's say, to the key of F. Okay, so I'm going to play Body and Soul, but in the key of F. So remember we said we're starting with the chord 2 going to chord 6, right? So da-dee-da-dee, that's chord 2 going to chord 6, right? And then a 2-5-1. And now chord 4. Da-dee-da-dee. To a 3, to a flat 3 diminished, right? And then chord 2 followed by the 2-5 of chord 6. And then a 2-5-1. And so forth. But I'm constantly thinking about movement, and I'm thinking of the function of each chord that I'm playing, right? I could have done that in the key of C. So it's a chord 2 first, right? There's my chord 2 going to chord 6, and then a 2-5-1. To chord 4, da-dee-da-dee, da-dee. 2-5. I mean a 2, then a 2-5 of 6. And then a 2-5-1. Okay, so this is exactly what I teach inside the Jazz Piano Fundamentals course. So not memorize this chart, not even play the song in this key, but actually understand the harmonic DNA of a song. So in the Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, I teach students how to break songs into harmonic formulas. I teach them how to understand chord progressions. I teach them how to recognize movement between the keys, and also to play tunes in multiple keys so that you become aware of the things that are in common when you go from one tune to the next. So that instead of seeing so much information or seeing every song as completely new information, when you're learning jazz, you then begin to see some structure and you begin to see some usable formulas. You can actually see that when you play Body and Soul, it is very similar to what you play when you're playing a song like My Romance. It's not very different. So some people might learn My Romance in the key of C, right? You start with a chord 5, chord 1, right? 1 going to 4. I remember seeing that in Body and Soul. And then I remember seeing a 3 going to a flat 3 diminished. And then a 2-5-1. So if I'm playing My Romance, I'm starting with chord 5, right? 1 to 4, to a 3, to a flat 3, to a 2, and a 5. Okay, so understanding movement and the functions of chords is going to enable you to see the similarities between songs. Okay. And once you start seeing the tools, the whole world of jazz will actually open up for you, and you won't need to rely on these anymore. You'll actually realize maybe that there's not that many things to memorize, you know. So if you rely on lead sheets, then every song that you learn feels like completely new information. And even transposing will feel like you're starting over every time. So you're playing with a vocalist and they say, oh, the key is too high or it's too low. Can we please change it? Then you'll get stuck. But if you understand harmony, then it's the same language, just in a different key. So what I mean by that is my romance could have been in the key of D flat. If that C was too low for the vocalist, my romance, chord 4, to chord 3, to a flat 3 diminished, and a 2, 5, 1. Okay, so you've got to understand not just the notes on the paper, but what do those things actually mean, and where the chord's going. Okay, that's the important thing. Let's talk about the melody. Okay, so I'm going to play Autumn Leaves is written on the lead sheet. So basically goes something like this. Actually, let me play this with a track and make life a little more interesting. Actually, you know what? I can't take it anymore, right? So, yes, I mean, technically what I'm doing is correct, you know, but it's quite lifeless if we're being honest. And that's because the lead sheet is only the skeleton. If we really want to make music, real music happens when I start making decisions on things like phrasing and rhythm and articulation, when I'm now interpreting the song in my own way, and when I'm also embellishing the melody. So in my new course, the Jazz Piano Lab, I teach this thing called melodic embellishment, and I'm going to show you a simple technique from that course called auxiliary notes. So basically, I'm going to take the notes of Autumn Leaves. In fact, I'm going to use auxiliary notes, but I'm also going to use a rhythmic technique called anticipation. And anticipation is simply you playing a note just before you normally play it. You know, so if I was going to play the first note of Autumn Leaves on beat 2, 1, 2, I'm now going to play it before 2, so I'm going to play it on the and of beat 1. So I'm going to go 1 and 2, 3. Actually, I hope you can hear how by simply changing one note, just by moving it, the song has a bit more life than it had before, you know. So I'm going to use some anticipation in some places, but also I'm going to use the auxiliary notes. An auxiliary note is simply a neighbor. So suppose I wanted to play E flat, right? I can play its neighbor. So there's a note above E flat. I keep saying F because the note I'm wanting is F. So if I wanted to play E flat, if I go up to F and come back, well, that's an upper auxiliary note. So I could have played my song like... That's already a little bit of interest that I've added to my melody. I could have played a lower auxiliary note, so I might have gone... Yeah, that's bringing a little bit more life, you know. So, upper auxiliary note, lower auxiliary note. So I'm going to play my melody for Autumn Leaves using those auxiliary notes, plus just a little bit of anticipation in some places, maybe even a little bit of delay sometimes. Delay simply means I'm going to play it a little later than I normally would. And let's hear what this sounds like. I'm actually looking forward to the result. Let's have that track again. Right, so what if I play like this? and I could go on and on. Suddenly, I don't know about you, but for me, the song suddenly has some life. It's breathing. It's more expressive. I enjoy playing it now. It's human. And the cool thing is, I might never play it exactly like that ever again. So I've got the tools. I might use those same tools like auxiliary notes or anticipation or delay. But man, for me, this is a way more interesting way to play jazz, So, and by the way, embellishing is a really fantastic gateway into the world of improvisation. The interesting thing is, in whatever I was doing, the melody was there. So I didn't really change the melody. This was just my own interpretation. Speaking of interpretation, I might play the song like this one day, and not even one day, 1 minute, and then the next minute I might be like, actually, what would this sound like if I played it as a bossa nova? So. So I hope you can see that I'm even changing chords, I'm changing rhythm, I'm changing quite a number of things. That's what jazz is really all about. So real jazz musicians don't rely permanently on lead sheets. Actually, I can take that song and play it different key. Different chords. So basically, we don't rely on these. This is restricting me to one key, particular rhythms, particular notes. And that's really not what we want. We want freedom. So jazz musicians, they don't necessarily play the melodies literally or as written. We don't necessarily memorize every note and every chord, and we don't treat them like fixed information. We are very free with these things. So we also internalize the sound and we use our ears, so that when we see a lead sheet, we're not necessarily reading music, we're simply using it as a tool to see what's happening in the music overall. So I just want to see the structure. I want to see the patterns. Is that a turnaround? Am I going from one key to another key? So basically, to cut the long story short, do not depend on lead sheets. Once you learn the harmony and then develop your ear, you don't need the training wheels anymore. And actually, when all is said and done, the best place to learn any tune from is recordings by the great jazz musicians. And again, in my free ebook, you will find a list of jazz musicians that you could start listening to start. So if you want to go deeper and really understand jazz tunes instead of relying on charts or the fake book, then please check out my Jazz Piano Fundamentals course. And if you want to learn how to transform simple melodies, like what I did there, and you want to transform them into real musical performances, then check out the Jazz Piano Lab. I'm going to link everything below and in the description. Now, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please do me a favor and click that subscribe button. If you've got any comments, please throw those in the comment section. And again, if you want to check out any of my resources, please do that. I would really appreciate your support. Now, make sure you use this information and you will get better. I hope to see you in the next video.